I never thought I would share this, but life has a way of delivering unexpected surprises. My name is Alice. I am 44 years old. For a long time, I was a single mother and raised my son alone. His name is Lenny, and he is now 22. We have always been close, helping each other get through life's ups and downs. One night, something unexpected happened. Lenny looked very tired and said he was feeling unwell. He had been working and studying a lot, and as he came in, something unexpected happened. I told him he could lie down on my bed for a while if he wanted to rest. The night in our house was chilly, and it took time to get warm. So I covered him with a warm blanket. At first, everything seemed ordinary, just a mother helping her son. But then, when I lay down next to him, I felt him move closer. He must have been trying to get warm, and I didn't think much of it. But then he hugged me, gently holding me close, like he used to as a child. I was a little surprised, but didn't pay much attention. Maybe he just needed comfort. I felt his warmth nearby, his steady breathing. As we lay there, I felt Lenny's breathing slow, as if he was falling asleep. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. It was strange, but at the same time calming. I didn't move, not wanting to disturb him, and kept telling myself it was just a mother comforting her son. But after a while, he moved again, pressing even closer under the blanket. I felt his arm hug me tighter, and for a moment I froze, not knowing what to think. Part of me wanted to say something, to pull away. But another part stayed still. There was a tension in the air I couldn't ignore, and I didn't know why. I could feel it. Then something happened that surprised me. I felt something hard under the blanket. It was unexpected, and my heart raced. I tried to stay calm, reminding myself he was only my son. Maybe he didn't realize it himself. I lay there, trying to ignore the feelings that were starting to grow inside me. I told myself it was just a moment, just a strange, awkward moment that would pass. But as the minutes went by, I realized everything had changed, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Lenny stayed close to me, his breathing even, but I felt the warmth between us growing. I wanted to move, to say something casual to ease the tension, but the words wouldn't come. I felt trapped in that moment, not knowing what I was feeling. Then Lenny shifted slightly, lifting his head to look at me. There was a softness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. A look that made me feel both safe and nervous. He didn't say anything, but his gaze seemed to ask if everything was all right. I tried to smile, hoping it would lessen the strange feeling, but it only made the silence deeper. Lenny's hand stayed on my arm, warm and gentle, reassuring. I felt the tips of his fingers moving softly, almost absent-mindedly. It was such a small thing, but every touch seemed to spark something. Something inside me I couldn't ignore. I tried to breathe evenly, not wanting him to notice how fast my heart was beating. I didn't know what to do or say, so I just lay there, feeling completely enveloped by the strange connection between us. I kept telling myself it was just a mother comforting her son. Nothing more, just this silence as we lay together under the distant blanket. Thoughts spun in my head that felt wrong, but I couldn't push them away. It was wrong. But lying so close to him, I felt something deeper. A closeness I didn't understand. I felt a mix of embarrassment and warmth. An unexpected feeling that held me. Lenny seemed unaware of my struggle. He just stayed beside me, his hand moving gently, soothing, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His breathing was calm. His eyes closed again, and I wondered if he was falling asleep. But then his hand moved, slowly touching mine. I felt a chill run through me, and he opened his eyes, looking straight into mine. There was a question in his gaze, as if he was asking if this was all right, if he felt the same strange pull that I did. He whispered my name, barely able to say the word. I wanted to stop it too. He leaned in closer, then pulled away, creating some distance, but for some reason I couldn't move. The tension between us was too strong, like a growing silent storm. In the silence, neither of us spoke, but the air was full of unspoken words. Of what Webb felt but couldn't bring himself to say. Then, as if it was the most natural thing, he leaned in closer. My heart pounded, my thoughts raced feverishly. But I couldn't make myself pull away. I was torn between my role as Ash's mother and the strange feelings that had surfaced. When he leaned closer, I felt my breath catch, and all my thoughts evaporated, leaving only this moment between us. Lenny's hand gently rested on my shoulder, and now his fingers lingered, as if he too was hesitating. The world around seemed so far away, and I could only focus on the warmth of his presence, the steady beat of his heart that I could almost hear for a moment. I closed my eyes, trying to calm myself. I ordered myself to detach, to break this closeness that felt so confusing and overwhelming. But then I felt his hand gently rise, brushing a strand of hair from my face. It was such a simple, caring gesture, yet it made my heart ache in a way I couldn't understand. I opened my eyes, and there he was, looking at me with such tenderness, such trust. His face was so close, and I could see every tiny detail, the faint freckles, the gentle curve of his lips, and the way he searched for my gaze. In his eyes, there was vulnerability, as raw as my own, and I saw that he was just as lost in this moment as I was, frozen in silence, as if time itself had stopped. Questions, doubts, and incomprehensible feelings swirled in my mind, but my body didn't move. I was drawn to him, to the person I had raised. And yet, in that moment, as I thought, he seemed to me like an entirely new person. We were suspended in that silence, as if forever. Lenny pulled back slightly, emerging from the trance. He looked away, almost embarrassed, and let out a shaky laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. That brought me back for a moment, making me realize how close we had been, how much we shared. Suddenly, it all crashed down on me. May took a deep breath, trying to cope with the wave of emotion that seemed to rise from every corner of her being. I desperately hoped he wouldn't notice the inner turmoil raging inside me. "Sorry, Mom," he said in a quiet, hesitant voice, a note of uncertainty in his words. "I didn't want to ruin everything." He turned away from me, and for a moment I saw a faint blush on his cheeks, a sign that perhaps he was also struggling with the same chaos of feelings I was trying to contain, trying to find myself. I wanted to comfort him, to say that it was all right, that this awkwardness didn't change anything between us, but the words just wouldn't come. I froze, not knowing how to break the silence. And in that brief moment, I realized with startling clarity that I had never felt so out of place beside my own son. Instinctively, I reached out, gently laying my hand on his shoulder, hoping that this small gesture would soothe him even a little. A quiet smile touched the corners of my lips as I tried to ease the tension, though I felt anxiety seeping into my words. "It's all right, Lenny," I murmured in a soft, steady voice, trying to calm him. "It's just, well, we've been alone together for so long, haven't we? We're used to it, and now it feels a little strange." He nodded, understanding, and I saw a flicker of relief in his eyes, as if my words had struck a chord. Just as the atmosphere seemed to ease, the doorbell rang, shattering the fragile calm we had only just begun to find. The sharp sound pulled us both out of the moment, reminding us of the world beyond that door. I quickly stood up, my heart still pounding from our conversation, feeling a strange sense of gratitude for the interruption. As I walked to the door, I noticed my pulse racing, and I couldn't shake the odd, lingering energy left from our talk. Opening the door, I saw our neighbor Mark standing on the other side. He was smiling his usual smile, offering an instant sense of comfort, though I felt his gaze linger on me a moment longer than usual, as if searching for something beneath the surface. I quickly composed myself, hoping he wouldn't notice the tension left over from the recent moment. "Hello, Alice." "Mark." "Hello." Alice greeted him warmly and easily. As always, I thought I'd stop by and see if you needed anything. I know it's gotten colder lately, and I can help with the heating if you have any trouble." His concern was a welcome relief, and for a moment I felt an unexpected wave of gratitude. I allowed myself to let the comfort of Mark's presence soften the remnants of gloom. "Oh, thank you, Mark," I said, giving him a smile that now felt a little more genuine. "Actually, it does get a bit chilly in the house, especially at night. I'd really appreciate your help, Mark." He stepped inside, confident and assured, and I immediately sensed, out of the corner of my eye, that Lenny was watching us. I saw his face, the expression hard to read. But something in the way he looked at us made me tense for a moment. I could have sworn I saw something like jealousy in his eyes, though he quickly hid his features, returning to his usual indifference. That look caught me off guard, leaving me with an uneasy feeling that perhaps Lenny was experiencing something more complicated than I had imagined. Mark wandered around the living room, checking the heater, making small talk. He asked how things were at home and how I was managing with everything. His voice was light, and his presence was soothing, which I hadn't expected. But all the while, my attention kept drifting back to Lenny, who stood silently in the hallway, watching us with a quiet intensity that made the air between us feel charged with something unspoken. The tension in the room shifted almost imperceptibly, and I found myself torn between wanting to welcome Mark warmly and trying to ease Lenny's growing discomfort. It was as if they were quietly vying for my attention, and I had no idea how to bridge the delicate space between them. I glanced at Lenny again, and for a moment I caught something flickering in his eyes, something that made me wonder if he was struggling with feelings he hadn't shared with me. But before I could make sense of it, Mark turned to me, his face breaking into a smile, as if reflecting the very air. "All right, it's okay, Alice," he said in a warm voice. "Just call if you need anything, Lenny." I thanked him, and as he stepped out the door, I could almost feel the tension between Lenny and me intensify, thickening the air and making everything seem even more complicated. I closed the door gently. I turned and saw Lenny standing motionless in the hallway, arms crossed over his chest. His face was serious, his gaze unyielding, and something in his posture made it clear that what was happening between us was far from resolved. "Are you okay, Lenny?" I asked quietly but searchingly, trying to understand the sudden distance that had formed between us. I needed to know what was going on in his mind, why the space between us seemed to bristle. He shrugged slightly, almost dismissively, answering in a barely audible voice, "Yeah, I'm fine. Just didn't expect Mark to show up." That was it. His words hung in the air, but they didn't explain everything that was going on inside him. I wanted to ask more, to understand why everything felt so different. But before I could form my next question, he turned and walked past me to his room, not sparing me a glance. One last look, and the silence between us became deafening, the soft click of his door closing behind him seeming to put a final period on a conversation that had barely begun. I stood frozen, caught in a strange mix of relief, confusion, and the uneasy sense that something important had been left behind, and I spoke. I found myself staring at Lenny's closed door. My heart ached with a sense of loss I couldn't put into words. It felt as if something between us had changed. Something unspoken hung in the air, like a cloud ready to burst from my memory. I remembered everything, how close we used to be. The way his gaze lingered ever so slightly when Mark was here, and the obvious tension simmering beneath the surface, threatening to break free. I made my way to my room and sat on the edge of my bed. My thoughts raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I knew I couldn't ignore this forever. Sooner or later, we would have to face what was changing between us. But I didn't know how to start, or even where to begin unraveling this web of feelings, when suddenly I was startled by what sounded like a soft knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat, hope flaring in my chest. Maybe Lenny had come back to talk. "Come in," I called, my voice steadier than I felt. The door creaked open, and there he stood in the doorway, wearing that same inscrutable expression I knew so well. he came in and sat beside me on the bed, folding his hands in his lap, eyes lowered. Lenny broke the silence between us. The quiet stretched heavier and heavier, as if the weight of all that was unsaid was unbearable. The moment felt almost suffocating, but in the end, necessary. Lenny broke the silence, his voice barely louder than a whisper. "Mom," he began, uncertain, as if carefully choosing each word. "I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry if I did something wrong. He trailed off, the words catching in his throat, his frustration obvious as he tried to shape emotions he couldn't fully express. I reached out and placed my hand over his, gently encouraging him, squeezing his hand softly, and that spoke more than words ever could. "It's all right," I replied quietly, my voice even despite the uncertainty swirling inside me. "We're both probably a little lost right now. It's just been the two of us for so long, and sometimes things get complicated. It's okay to feel confused." He nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on his hands, his eyes distant. There was a heaviness in his look, a depth of emotion that made my heart ache. Then, after what felt like an eternity, I finally looked up at him. His gaze was full of conflicting emotions. Uncertainty, frustration, longing, and something else I couldn't quite name, but it felt different. It wasn't just ordinary disappointment or confusion. There was something more. Something unspoken. I didn't know what to say. He mumbled so quietly I almost missed the words. It was as if he was afraid to admit it, but also afraid to face what was growing between us. The vulnerability in his words struck me harder than I expected. And in that moment, I realized just how much this was affecting him. I could feel the weight in my heart tighten with the confusion in his eyes. For a moment, I was overwhelmed by the urge to pull him into a hug and hold him close. I wanted to embrace him and tell him everything would be all right. To reassure him that we would get through this together. But I hesitated, unsure if that would help or only make things more complicated. It was unclear what he needed, and I wasn't sure if my desire to comfort him was the right thing. So I stayed still, letting the heavy silence between us speak louder than any words. I sat there, feeling the weight of unspoken tension, waiting for the right moment, not knowing how to break the silence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I took a deep breath, gathering myself, and turned to him. I looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of who he had been, feeling what he might have needed over the millennia. Maybe we just needed to take a step back and really think things through. I sighed softly, trying to find the right word, the right balance between comfort and understanding. It's normal to feel close to each other, but it's also okay to need space to sort out your thoughts. We don't have to figure everything out right now. He nodded slowly, as if realizing the weight of my words, but then an unexpected movement caught me off guard. Taken by surprise, he rested his head on my shoulder. That gesture instantly took me back to the days when he was younger, when he often sought comfort in such a familiar way. It was warm and soothing, and yet there was something different about it. Now, beneath the surface, there was a tension I couldn't ignore, a quiet awareness that something between us had changed in ways we hadn't yet fully understood. My heart softened at his touch, and without thinking, I embraced him, holding him close with a sense of protection and comfort. This embrace brought a sense of safety. Even though I knew the questions we tormented each other with were still far from answered, there was so much left unsaid, so many emotions we hadn't yet fully worked through. But in that moment, I realized that maybe we didn't need all the answers. Right now, we could just take it one step at a time and figure things out together. Even if the path ahead seemed uncertain and difficult, as long as we sat there, they held on to each other. I felt a quiet calm wash over me. A gentle, barely perceptible hope hung in the air. That whatever we faced, no matter how hard it seemed, we would still find a way together. We stood like that for a while, wrapped in silence, and our closeness brought a fleeting sense of peace, if only for a brief moment. It seemed as if the confusion and complexity of our situation could dissolve, simply by being near each other. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. His presence brought undeniable comfort. But behind that warmth was a hidden anxiety, a feeling neither of us could completely shake. After a while, Lenny pulled away slightly, lifted his head, and met my gaze. His serious, tense expression changed the comfort of the moment. Yes. Serious tension. Mom. I don't know what to do with all these feelings, he said quietly. There was uncertainty in his voice. I don't want to complicate things between us, but I also can't just ignore it. His words hung in the air, filled with unspoken tension, like a question he was afraid to ask. The weight of his silence pressed on me, on my tightened heart, my thoughts racing as I tried to find the right word. I opened my mouth, but before I could say anything, there was another knock at the door. We both jumped, startled by the interruption. Our eyes met in surprise and uncertainty. The knock was sharp and deliberate, as if the person on the other side sensed something was wrong and wanted to break through whatever hung between us. A wave of nervous energy swept over me, and without thinking, I stood up and went to the door. When I opened it, Mark was standing there again, his face clouded with worry, as if he was weighing something heavy in his mind. He spoke, and there was genuine concern in his voice. Sorry to bother you. Just wanted to check if everything was all right. You seem a bit off, and I wanted to make sure you're okay. I hesitated for a moment, then glanced back over my shoulder at Lenny. He was watching us closely, his face unreadable, full of unspoken questions. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice, though it trembled slightly as I replied, "Thank you, Mark, but we're fine. Just a quiet evening." Mark gave me a long, searching look, then turned his gaze to Lenny. His eyes lingered on him, thoughtful and probing, before returning to me. He nodded slowly, though something in his manner suggested he wasn't fully convinced. Everything softens, right? He said, his tone gentler. Just remember, I'm here. If you need anything, don't hesitate. As he turned and left, I quietly closed the door and leaned against it for a moment. Gathering my thoughts, I turned to Lenny, who was still standing there, watching me with such intense attention that it sent a shiver down my spine. His gaze seemed to pierce right through me. I was searching for something, perhaps truth or comfort. After a long pause, he stood up, slowly and deliberately, and I felt my heart start to race again. The air between us grew heavy once more, thick with everything neither of us dared to say. He moved closer and hugged me, waiting for any words that might come next. But as he approached, he stopped, his expression changing as if he was struggling with some inner conflict. Maybe we shouldn't rush things, Mom, he said quietly, his voice trembling. Just a little longer. Maybe we need time to think. No, his words crashed over me like a wave, and I nodded. My heart was torn by the same conflicting feelings he must have been experiencing. I understood that time was needed to think things through. You're right, Lenny, I answered softly, my voice hoarse with the weight of the unspoken. We both need to think things through. We can't rush. Lenny nodded in agreement, and we stood in silence, feeling a strange mix of closeness and distance, as if we were on the threshold of something we couldn't fully understand or control. It felt like an ending, but also the beginning of something new, something we couldn't yet clearly define. As he slowly walked to his room, I remained frozen in place, wondering what the future held for us and whether we would find our way together or part ways. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Before we say goodbye, if you haven't subscribed yet, I invite you to click the subscribe button. Your support, even if it seems like a small gesture, means a lot to us and inspires us to keep creating heartfelt content. Don't forget to like if you enjoyed what we shared today. Every interaction helps us grow and allows us to continue connecting with you through meaningful stories. Thank you for being part of this